This week, we're working to look into the past, as always, but we're looking at hidden or suppressed information on discoveries, on the history of our planet. And I'm welcoming back a favorite of mine, Jim Willis, who has written a new book called Hidden History, Ancient Aliens, and the Suppressed Origins of Civilization. And for those of you who are not familiar with Jim, he is a past minister. We had Jim give us a what I'll call a prayer and intention when this pandemic started, and we're still in the middle of it, unfortunately, and it doesn't look like there's an end. It looks like it's going to be a while before we have a resolution to this. But Jim is the author of Ancient Gods, Lost Histories, Hidden Truths, The Conspiracy of Silence, Supernatural Gods, Spiritual Mysteries, Psychic Experiences, and Scientific Truths, and Lost Civilizations, The Secret Histories and Suppressed Technologies of the Ancients, I should say. And this book is a real fun book for many reasons. Probably for me, the most is that Jim is a good research investigator and really brings to the surface details about not only discoveries, but suppressed discoveries, stuff that came out later, and just what we're dealing with right now with the orthodoxy. And when I say orthodoxy, we're talking about the archaeologists, the anthropologists, the historians who write our books, what our students are and our children are reading right now, and why they have a problem with a lot of the material that we bring up here on Earth Ancients. So, hey, Jim, great to have you back. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Cliff. Hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah. So what's it like? You're self-isolating. Of course, you're in a remote area of North Carolina, right?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Pardon me.
We started self-isolating about almost 11 years ago, and it's working real well.
Yeah, me too. Now, do you grow your own vegetables and?
We used to. We don't do it quite so much anymore. I'm not as young as I used to be, and we just don't do as much of it. But there are so many farmers markets and things like that around here that it's almost the same. So
okay, so it's not too much of a problem for you to. I mean, you're somewhat isolated already.
Yeah, that's been a problem, to tell you the honest truth. We have to deal with guilt. Frankly, the rest of the world is having all this kind of stuff. My wife Barb and I have lived here for almost 11 years now. My daughter Jan moved in next door. We built her a house about 3 years ago, and it really hasn't changed much for us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to go to the grocery store and that kind of thing every couple of weeks, but we're dealing with feeling guilty because it hasn't really affected our lives, and other people are going through so much.
Yeah.
I look at the people who are in the grocery stores having to put out groceries and everything else. Man, I planned for it, and we wear masks and all this kind of stuff. And here, man, they just to put food on their own table, they have to work in that kind of an environment all day. And they are heroes, as far as I'm concerned. They're just heroes.
Yeah, the people that are, I guess you could call them essential workers, that are doing keeping the grocery stores open, and some of the necessities of life, like the pharmacies and the drugstores too, have to stay open. So,
right.
I don't know. What do you see, real quickly? What do you see as the outcome of this? We're definitely changed, don't you think?
I'm trying to be hopeful. I'm trying to remind myself that as bad as the bubonic plague was, and as long as it lasted, on the other side of the bubonic plague was the Renaissance. And I'm hoping that something like that happens to us. I would hate to waste this by not making changes. I hear a lot of people saying, let's get back to normal. But wow, I think normal is what got us into this problem. I think we have to learn from it. Otherwise, we've wasted all those people who died there. They died in vain if we don't start making the changes. So I see us at a crossroads. I really do. I see us at another civilization. And you and I have talked in the past when the book Lost Civilizations came out. I see our civilization right at a crossroads. We can learn from this and come out of it more mature people on the other side, or we can just go right back to the old ways of doing things. And I think I think our destiny, I don't want to sound too melodramatic, but we could easily become another lost civilization, or we could become a civilization that has learned and grown from this. I hope the latter.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was looking at some statistics that, every year we deal with the flu and thousands of people die, but this is more conscious,
Yeah.
very much consciously aware of our health and our social activities. And I think there's something to be said about that. It's like we're more aware because of this. And what would you say it is? Is it, I mean, obviously it's a conscious and physical awareness, but it's almost a global awareness too of how our neighbors are functioning under these circumstances.
Yeah, it says something about our global relations, but I think it also says something about ourselves as a society. It's no secret, we are a very divided society right now. I'm sure there are people listening to this program, some on the left, some on the right, but we're very divided. And when we start facing this kind of a tragedy and now looking at armed groups, people with semi-automatic weapons showing up and demanding their freedom and that kind of thing, it shows a polarization of our country that frankly it has me scared more than the virus. It really does.
Yeah, it's true. It's nerve wracking.
I'm really wondering how deep seated this is. We are in for a fundamental change, and I don't think it's going to happen quickly. But it's going to be much more than just a physical change of handling the virus. I think it's also going to be a deep-seated cultural change that yeah, we have to come together as a country. If we don't, I think we're doomed. I really do.
Yeah.
And so, having spent so much time with lost civilizations of the past and what has happened to people in the past, I find this somehow very relevant. I don't know if the changes are all going to come in my lifetime, but I think they certainly will in the lifetime of my children and my grandchildren. That's for
Mm.
sure.
One of the things you bring up in your book, Hidden History, which I find fascinating, is you bring up the outer world, or what I call the off-world civilizations, and their potential influence on our planet. And,
Yeah.
I'm speaking in this in the terms of panspermia,
Uh-huh.
intelligent seeding of our planet. I really find that this is a possible area that could be intelligently designed. We are receiving these microbes from another source, from an intelligent design, to see if we can make it through. Is to see if the possibilities are endless. What do you think about that?
One of the things that has really affected me in writing Hidden History, I thought I had my mind around how big the universe was. I thought I understood, and I knew it was bigger than we can any of us grasp. But the more I looked at it, and the more I studied, and the more people I talked to, the more experts I talked to, you realize how tremendously vast a universe this is. And it can mean one of two things equally fantastic to me. There are some people who say that as far as we know, and maybe this is the case, we are the only intelligent sentient beings that have ever arisen, that somehow consciousness came through the biology of planet Earth and nowhere else. We just happen to be living in that fortunate place where it happened. Well, if that's the case, I find it almost mind-boggling as how big the universe is and how unique we are, and that gives us a tremendous responsibility. To be honest, I'm much more inclined to think that this huge, vast, some people are now using words, infinite universe, with no boundary, no edge, and just goes on forever. And it never had a beginning and never had an end. Even if there was a big bang, perhaps it wasn't the first big bang, and maybe big bangs happen every 30, 40 billion years, who knows? That's even more complex, because to me, that says that there almost has to be other intelligent life out there. And so I say, well, what would they do if they were in our position? And I'm intrigued by the fact that as soon as we could get off planet Earth and send Voyager out into the heavens, the first thing we did, even though most of the scientists were skeptical about whether there's life out there, we included Carl Sagan's famous golden record and the picture of Earth. And basically we were saying, here we are. We're talking right now about terraforming Mars. Perhaps there was once a civilization there before that something happened, their technology got out of control. We don't know. At any point, we're talking about terraforming Mars so that humans could live there. Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon, but still, we're talking about it. Intelligent scientists are talking about it. And if that's the case, if our inclination is we can get out, let's get out there. Let's try to navigate in space. Let's try to make these distances smaller. Let's make ourselves open and receptive. If we did it, it just stands to reason that other people would have done it if they had arisen in our situation. So I just panspermia, I think, is a very viable theory. The idea that somehow Earth was seeded with biological life in the past, either by accident or on purpose. Of course, that just raises another question. In one sense, it just kicks can down the road, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody else seeded it, how did they get seeded? It just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
We are a part of something that is so immense, so big, that frankly, I find myself getting almost angry at people who get so bogged down by little things here on Earth that we don't realize, wow, we are a hot commodity in the universe. Let's take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Makes me want to watch Star Trek even all the more.
Well, this is a good opportunity to watch all the series of Star Trek. I mean, I think
We've been doing that.
I love those scientific programs.
But you know, when you think about it, you take Gobekli Tepe or Poverty Point in Louisiana, the first mound building culture. In Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, for instance, we hope to go there in September with a tour. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. We'll have to wait and see. But if anybody's interested in going, please check us out through Ancient Origins and through my website. But at any rate, here's a group of hunter-gatherers that were just barely living, subsistence living, looking for their down. There was no agriculture. There were no cities. They were migrating around a landscape, going wherever the food was. All of a sudden, one day they wake up and say, let's all band together, thousands of us, at least hundreds of us, let's all band together, move these megaton boulders, set them up, create the world's first temple, and oh, by the way, we need food supply, so let's invent agriculture along the way. That just doesn't happen. And yet 11,800 years ago, it did happen. How did that happen? Well, the only two possibilities are that either one, they took a great leap forward suddenly intellectually, and then we have to ask, well, why did they do that? So they just either invented this stuff, which is a mystery, or they were taught it by somebody else. They inherited the skills to do this. And if that was the case, well then, who taught them? Who did they inherit it from? A past civilization, a civilization from off planet Earth, an ice age civilization that we don't know anything about? The same thing happened in Louisiana. Last summer, I was on a field trip myself for research. I was looking into mound building cultures. And I went down to Louisiana, down to Poverty Point, where it all began. And there's a lot of questions about how did the people at Poverty Point begin. There's a question about whether there was Mayan insurgents up into the United States. The Mayans taught the people this thing. There's other people that say, no, they just somehow learned to do it on their own, or they inherit it from some other culture or somewhere else in the country. Nobody knows, but they're at Poverty Point, hunter-gatherers who all of a sudden one day decided to band together and to build these tremendous mounds. The story that we're being told about how this all started, to me, it just doesn't make sense. I think we have to push the dates back. I think we have to look for cultures that we've never thought about, civilizations that we haven't thought about, and maybe alien presences that we just really haven't thought about. I think it's all in there. And I think the problem that we make is we diminish ourselves when we close our eyes to this. I've got a great story I got to tell you about Poverty Point. You know, Graham Hancock is one of my heroes. And last summer, his newest book, America Before, had just come out relatively recently. And that was one of the things that inspired me to go look at these mountains that I wanted to see. So I was out in Poverty Point. I started in Georgia and Alabama, and I went to all of the different mound building centers that I could find, went into every museum, talked to every expert. So there I was, first thing in the morning in the museum down there at Poverty Point. And the docent, the archaeologist who was running the place, was a real archaeological fundamentalist, let's say. He was a Clovis-first guy. And for those who are not quite sure about Clovis-first, it comes from the culture that for 100 years in America we were taught was the first culture to come over here. 16, maybe even possibly 20,000 years ago, people walked over the Siberian land bridge and down through Alaska and down into Montana and down here. And it was a beautiful theory, an elegant theory. It made everything worthwhile because we found now near Clovis, Mexico, an example of the kind of spear point that they use called the Clovis point, and it was found in the same structure as a mastodon that could be dated to 16,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago. I forgot what it was. And so here we had a date, we had an artifact, we had the Siberian land bridge was open, Beringia was open, and it all fit. And so it was so big, and everybody just went along with it for so long that it became the go-to position in archaeology. If you weren't a Clovis-first guy,
Yeah.
you weren't going to get a job, you weren't going to get hired, you weren't going to get any money for funding, well, all this. But then now all of a sudden a bunch of other finds started to come out right downriver from me, about 40 miles down the Savannah River. Dr. Al Goodyear, who was a wonderful archaeologist and professor here in our university in South Carolina, was digging in a Clovis dig, and he wanted to go deeper. He was inspired by what he saw in Pennsylvania, what he saw about New Mexico, and what he heard about down south in Peru. And he said, I want to go deeper, but he gathered his students around and said, I got to warn you, if we go deeper and find something, you're risking your careers because Clovis-first is it. If you're not a Clovis-first, he was a Clovis-first guy himself, but then he went down and he found spear points. I mean, worked tools, stone tools that were unequivocally dated 50,000 years ago.
Let me stop you real quickly, Jim. Let me stop you as a thought. Did he actually say that to his students? That if you keep following me and we dig deeper, we may find things that could ruin your career?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he not only said that.
I don't remember reading that. That's hilarious.
He told me in a letter that he wrote me. He and I were corresponding back.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he warned me. I mean, he told me that that's what he did to his students. He says, watch it. He wanted to give them a chance to back out if they wanted.
Wow.
Well, with all of this information, I found myself down at Poverty Point, and I walked into the museum there first thing in the morning. I was the first guy in, and the archaeologist who runs the place comes up to me and sees me, and he sees I'm interested, and he said, any questions? Well, I was just trying to be polite to the guy. So I said, boy, I imagine I was the only one in the place. So I said, I imagine this place is going to be filled up pretty quick now that Graham Hancock has written this book, America Before. Now you're going to have a lot of people visiting. And the guy pulled himself back up, lifted up his shoulders and said, I have never read any of Graham Hancock's books. So just to be nice, I said, well, why not? And he gave me a great scientific answer. He said, because Graham Hancock is an idiot.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah.
He said that to me. And I knew there was no talking to him. You know, when you get a fundamentalist, whether he's a religious fundamentalist or a scientific fundamentalist or an archaeological fundamentalist or a political fundamentalist, they have their own way of defining the world as us against them.
Yeah.
And it's out there. And that was the biggest surprise I had probably in writing Hidden History, running into these people all over the place.
Now, the book, Hidden History, that you've written basically covers just what you've brought to us, which is this orthodoxy, and they're they stick to their scientific method. They're not really willing to look at other evidence, even in the face of it being a profound discovery.
Yeah.
You go through a number of different scientists, but let me ask you this, Jim. Would you say that the current scientific method in its format doesn't allow for new discoveries to come in, and if they are new and if they are presented by a peer?
Yeah.
Is this the problem that we're facing?
Well, the scientific method, I think it allows it. The problem with what we just call fundamentalism isn't what people believe. I think it's an attitude that you find among fundamentalists, my way or the highway. And it's very difficult to break into that. Let me just give you a couple examples. Hugh Everett died a heartbroken man, really. Hugh Everett was one of the greatest theoretical physicists and a very intelligent man. As a matter of fact, when he was blackballed from physics for all practical purposes, he had worked for the government. And Hugh Everett was the one that really came up with the idea of mutual assured destruction that got us through the Cold War, that got us through our whole Cuba thing. A very brilliant man, but he was the one that came up with the whole idea of these bubble universes, these the multiverse. And he was absolutely pushed out of science. He couldn't get a job. He couldn't get a speaking engagement. Nobody was interested in him. He had to leave his chosen field and go out and work for the government, and he died a broken man. And now almost every single thing that he put forth, every single theory that he put forth is now accepted by many, many very brilliant people. Hugh Everett became the hero to Max, is it Tegmark, I think it is, who from MIT. And you find Hugh Everett's ideas talked about all the time, but nobody knows it. Another guy that people aren't as familiar with is Warren Moorhead, who worked up in New England. And he was the one that came up with the whole idea of the red paint people culture, uh, moving in right after the glacier, and a very sophisticated people who went all the way from the Maritimes down to Long Island, and nobody believed it. He wasn't allowed to give any speaking. He was criticized. They didn't go after his ideas as much as they went after his personality or his character, and they tried to blackball him in this way. And so I think that's the problem. When you talk about the scientific method, we're really talking about two problems. First of all, the scientific method is an excellent method at looking at stuff within our material universe, within our perception realm. But as soon as you start to go outside of that perception realm, as soon as you start talking about alien cultures, for instance, or as soon as you start talking about spirituality or consciousness or anything like that, it's not designed to measure that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And I think it's falling down because I think the whole quantum field studies is breaking it apart, because quantum theory is so anti-intuitive. It's so different that it's just. I think people are starting to open up at least a little more. I hope their minds are open, but even more, I hope their hearts and attitudes open up to start treating each other with respect. I really do.
I love the way you have each chapter, and then in part of the chapter you have the alien question or the off-world question.
Yeah.
I really want you to address this right now, Jim, and we haven't talked about it enough. You bring up Eric Van Donigen and Zecharia Sitchin as the founders of the ancient alien theory. And obviously, the History Channel plays Ancient Aliens. You can see the years. They've been in place 14 years, and they continue to grow in popularity. Where does that fit in, really? Because, honest to God, and I'm looking forward to seeing some contact. I mean, we just had a big week of Mars archaeology, and we had expert scientists that are showing that there was a civilization on Mars. How do we incorporate the most basic fundamental ideas of off-world cultures influencing our history?
I have to go even farther than when we say ancient aliens. We all get the idea. We're talking about little green men and flying saucers and that kind of thing. I have to go even farther than that. I have no doubt whatsoever in my own mind, and this is just my own opinion now, because I've never had an alien encounter, unless you count out-of-body experiences. But that's a whole different ball of wax. But in my own mind, I find it almost impossible to explain some of the history of planet Earth without thinking that it came somehow from outside our own biological system. Now, it could have come from different ways, and I like to blow up my whole idea of ancient aliens. I like to include not only physical contact with actual alien species from other planets in the universe. I like to expand that to also include the supernatural and the metaphysical. And I don't do that just to be a kind of a woo-woo, new agey kind of guy. It's just that that's where physics is pointing. Physics is pointing us at other dimensions, at worlds that are only vibrations apart. Membrane theory, consisting of whole universes that are separated only by a couple of degrees of vibration. If we are trying to get out and travel to contact them, I have to believe that somehow they are trying to contact us. Now, I know this raises a problem with real physics. The big problem that most people have with ancient aliens in terms of nuts and bolts spaceships is, how do they travel so far? The distances are just so vast. And I can answer that in two ways. Number one, I forgot, I think it was Arthur Clarke, I think, who said any technology sufficiently advanced is going to appear as magic.
Oh, yeah.
There was one time in the world. I mean, if Isaac Newton walked into my room right now and saw us talking on a computer with a lights and everything else, and heard us talking 3,000 miles apart, he'd run from the room thinking it was magic, you know. But we discovered how to do it. So I don't think the vast distances of space are even mechanically that hard. I think we will someday discover ways that we just don't know yet, but they're there, and I think it's possible. The other thing is, having had so much out of body experience and talking to other people who have done the same thing, having been up to the Monroe Institute and talked to Bill Buhlman and all those people, and having had experiences myself, I don't think traveling by the speed of thought, let's say, is that out of the question. So have we been visited? Yeah, I'm sure we have. Whether they came from other parts of our own galaxy, whether they came from universes or dimensions that are not that far away from us, I don't know. But to my way of thinking, it's the only way you can explain some of these great, great gaps that were all of a sudden bridged. And I'm talking about, how do you get life from non-life, or how do you develop a civilization from a non-civilization overnight, or that kind of thing.
You have a whole section, a chapter, actually more than a chapter, on the various hominins that have appeared in our history. We have the bones and the bits and pieces of artifacts. And what's interesting in your thought process is you bring up mitochondrial Eve, which is a 200,000-year-old, maybe a starting point for Homo sapiens sapien. But what does that mean when we think about alien intervention? You know, is this shift from very primitive hominins into Homo sapiens sapien a natural evolution? You make us think in your writing that maybe there was some intervention.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I'm not gonna rule it out. That's for sure. But to be honest, I'm also not going to rule out the possibility. We talk about mitochondrial Eve being 200,000 years ago, and our species being 200, or now they're starting to say 300,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But we know for a fact that there were other species older than us. We now know about Neanderthal. We know about Denisovan. Frankly, when it comes to Denisovan, in the last 10 years, I'm a little embarrassed. This discovery of Denisovan, when I first wrote, I think it was Ancient Gods, at that time, we only had one little finger bone, and discovered at the Denisova cave in Siberia. And out of this one little finger bone, they had come up with this whole species that we knew nothing about. And at the time, I'm embarrassed. I was a little disparaging. I think I said something like, one little finger bone, and from that we hypothesize a whole race of people. But in the last 8-10 years, they are out there. Not only that, but the new species we've discovered in Indonesia, the hobbits, for instance, and others. Now, I'm not going to be surprised at all if we discover that intelligent species, which may be human-like, but maybe reptilian, maybe who knows what, could have existed way, way back in history that we don't know anything about. One conversation that I had, I thought was absolutely fantastic. I won't give the names because I don't want to get any scientists in trouble, but a reporter talking to a scientist and going back and studying from the very rock formations, how in the past the Earth has gone through a period of global warming that's suspiciously similar to what we're going through right now. And we find the evidence encased in rock crystals and things like that. And in some cases, even ice cores and things from Greenland. And he said, well, what caused it if there were no people on the Earth back a billion years ago, 2 billion years ago? And the scientist said, how do you know there was no one on the Earth 2 billion years ago?
Right.
Any evidence of them would have been long gone. It would have been destroyed totally by the things of nature. How do we know that it wasn't there? And to me, that just gives me such a sense of wonder and awe that I get really excited about this. So in answer to your question, I'm not going to be surprised to find at all that there was some manipulation. Now, we like to think about, when we say DNA manipulation, we like to think about it as somebody coming down and taking our DNA and putting it in a test tube and everything, because that's the way we do it in the laboratory. But don't forget, DNA manipulation also takes place when two people from two different species breed with one another, when they mate with one another. Now that all of a sudden takes us into all these wonderful mythologies, like go right into the Bible and in the book of Genesis. There were giants in the land in those days when the sons of God came down to mate with the daughters of men, and their offspring were called the Nephilim. That's DNA manipulation, and it's in the Bible. It's right there in our own word. So I just think we have to be much more open to this than we have in the past.
I want you to talk a little bit about an interesting. I guess it's definitely a hominin, but it's a Petralona Man that was found in these caves that is dated to 700,000 years ago, and it's somewhat suppressed because of such an extreme date. Talk about that, because I haven't heard of that. It must be in limited scientific journals, and it's maybe still a hominin that is still being questioned.
The problem is that they can't even make it into the scientific journals. They're in papers that have been published and things, but they can't make it into the journals because the journals, the editors are saying, no, we can't run with that. Why? It'll make us look foolish. It's so outlandish.
Yeah.
It's so out there. And that's why I know there's a lot of fantastic stuff on television. I know that a lot of these television programs, they have a certain amount of place to fill, of space to fill. And so they jumble it up with a lot of, some of it's nonsense, but not all of it. As a matter of fact, I just find, I love these programs. And the reason I do is because for the first time in history now, it gives these people a platform where they can come out and get to the public without having to go through 13 committees, 14 professors, 17 years of peer review, and then an editing board that says, we don't want to publish it because it's too out there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these people are able to speak to the public in real time. And I think that's wonderful. So when I see Giorgio, I say, you go, man.
Well, I think that upsets the orthodoxy when you see a show that's seen and loved by millions and millions of people.
Millions.
And they'll publish a book, and maybe their peers, which account for, let's say, 1,000 people, review it. They're incensed that Ancient Aliens is so popular.
Yeah. Well, look at Eric von Daniken right there. The man is a saint as far as I know. Yeah. He took the slings and arrows. He was the first.
Yeah.
Boy, they almost crucified him, the establishment did. And you find the same thing. His name escapes me right now. The man who wrote America BC, Barry Fell.
Barry Fell, yeah.
And, he was just absolutely pilloried in print.
What a great book.
Those pioneers, boy, they were brave. They began, and when they were alone, there was nobody to stand with them to speak of. And now their ideas are considered almost quaint. Thank goodness for people like that.
You don't hear a lot about Barry Fell, though. His books were amazing on the megalithic builders of America and some of their early discoveries. It's a fascinating book, America BC. But that gets me to my next point, Jim, and I see this a lot in my research on the Maya, and we've had a number of scientists on the program and research investigating authors, the idea of cultural exchange from different civilizations, which is known as diffusion.
Yeah.
In your opinion, you highlight this a little bit in the book, why is there such a disdain for the idea that, say, the Chinese came across the Pacific and settled in parts of America, or the early Europeans came and settled the eastern seaboard, the Vikings and so forth? They just cannot, and you bring this up again and again in your book, the idea of multicultural exchange in the Americas. Why is it so hard for them?
I chalk it up to what we were talking about earlier, to fundamentalism. It's so difficult. If you're going to say that the Mayans came from someplace, now all of a sudden you can't just study the Mayans. You have to open up and you have to start studying places where they may have come from. that opens up uncomfortable things. That opens up Atlantis. That opens up Africa. It means, and look, I understand how difficult it is as a college professor. I have stood in front of a group of students and delivered my lecture and had my discussions and assigned the reading and all that kind of stuff. And I'm the expert. So I'm supposed to stand up and tell these students what it is. Okay, so I did it. Not only that, I was then told that by the authorities at the college that I had to test these students on whether or not they understood the material. So these students had to not only learn, they had to take tests, and I graded them. I said, you parroted back to me what I gave to you, therefore I give you an A. You're thinking off base somewhere, therefore I give you a C. 10 years, 15 years go by, and all of a sudden, the A students, all the stuff that they memorized, I have to now say to them, I was wrong. And the
Yeah.
C students, I penalized you with a C, and you were right. That's a hard thing to do. And so most of these fundamentalist professors have a very difficult time. In the case of the Maya, again, we have a tremendous problem in church circles, for instance, because why don't we know more about the Mayans? Why don't we know more about the Olmecs? Because the church people, the conquistadors and the priests, they came over here and burned all the literature. They destroyed all the wisdom. They said it was pagan. And now the church is going to say, oh, we were wrong? Well, sometimes they are starting to say that a little bit right now,
They are, I hope.
but not very much.
No.
I mean, Galileo, I think it was it Pope Benedict was the first one to say, well, with Galileo, maybe we had it wrong. He was the first one. And it took that long. So I just think it's really tough for people to get out of their comfort zone, and especially older professors who lived their whole life teaching and believing a certain theory of civilization, saying that all of a sudden say, yeah, it was wrong. Are they going to say my life was a mistake? That's pretty hard to say.
But I mean, I want to ask you, you bring this a really good point up here. I mean, right now in the history books where we think that, 30,000 years ago, there were the hunters and gatherers of America. But and you bring this up, and I also, Graham Hancock brings it up in his book with a whole chapter. In San Diego, they discovered the remains of mastodon bones.
100,000 years old.
130,000.
130,000. That's right. That's right.
And it was, and these were not just students, or this was an archaeologist, a paleontologist,
yes,
who verified the stonework and everything like that. You talk about this in detail, and yet orthodoxy just cannot grasp it. And these guys were hammered. They were vilified. They were humiliated. But it's a fact that these stones, and I guess it's in a museum in San Diego now, the bones of this mastodon. Why is it so hard for orthodoxy to accept new evidence?
I know it. And these people are almost defensive about it. When the famous documentary came out, America BC, when they were talking about, for the first time, a big documentary covered the Solutrean hypothesis that said America may have been settled not just from the west, but also from the east with boats. I'll never forget hearing the archaeologists say, I don't want just one piece of evidence. I want many pieces of evidence. And he's almost saying your job is to prove, and he's going to dig in his heels and just make it. And they say they're being scientific. They say, well, we're making it tough because then you have to really prove your case. And I guess there's a point there. But to me, that's not openness at all. To get an idea of 130,000 years of possible civilization in America, figure from the pyramids to us, it's been 5,000-6,000 years. And that seems like an awfully long time. Look what's happened since the pyramids were built to us. Now take that period of 5,000-6,000 years. How many of those 5,000 or 6,000 era spans can you drop into 130,000 years of history? Many of them. There was times over and over and over again, just in America, that could have seen the rise of great civilizations and the fall of great civilizations. And when people hear that, they say, well, then where is the evidence? Where are the wires? Where are the big buildings? We assume that when we say a great civilization, that civilization has to look just like us. What about a civilization that could have arisen that said, We don't want to go the direction. They were smarter than us. They said, you go the direction of great cities and electricity and all this kind of stuff. You go that way, you're headed for doom. And so they made a decision not to go that way. Maybe they developed totally different tools. For instance, a psychic toolkit. Maybe to them, psychokinesis was a very real force in their life. Maybe the ability to be able to raise great stones in Peru and in Central America, Mexico. I mean, maybe they had the ability to do that with only the ideas of their minds. We can't do that today because it is, if that ability ever existed, it is atrophied within us. But that's not to say we can't wake it up and start to use it again. If only we can open our minds and say, it might have been. It might have been. My favorite story about this is a story that happened to me when I was in the pyramids for the first time. We were going down underneath the pyramid, you know, and you go down that long pathway and everything. I'm seeing the wires that are running along the pathway that are powering all the lights in underneath the pyramid. And I'm thinking, wow, without those lights, it's dark down in here. I mean, how did they do it? So I looked up at the ceiling. I'm seeing no soot, no nothing, no fires, anything like that. And so I said to the guide, how did the people see to work down here? And he looked at me and kind of turned away. He says, well, they must have had a light source. And off he went. A light source. Okay, great. What light source? And instead of just saying they had to be like us, they had to do it the way we did it, why don't we say that maybe these great civilizations that are hidden in the past under very different ways of doing things than we did? To me, that's pretty awe-inspiring.
Do you think, Jim, and you've written a lot about the subtle bodies of the physiology in terms of psychic abilities and things like that. Do you think that if we were more open, we would have access to these subtle parts of our makeup? Because it seems like Eastern philosophy and the Eastern cultures talk a lot about meditation and psychic awareness. And the Western side, where we live, doesn't really want to talk about that.
No. Here's where I think the work of, for instance, Dean Radin out at the Noetic.
I love Dean.
That work is so important because, I mean, what they're doing is looking at this and substantiating it with real science that can be understood by a left brain scientist. And Dean is, well, you've talked to him, so you know he's such a wonderful person to talk to because he is so brilliant. And he's so open-minded, but he's so down to earth and grounded in the scientific method that if the breakthrough is going to come, I think it's probably people like him who are going to convince it. But I think we make a mistake when we just take this idea that said, if I haven't personally experienced it, then it can't exist. I think we have to say, I may not have experienced it, but I really believe that someone else down the street has. I want to talk to him. I want to find out. I know for my whole life, if you would ask me about out-of-body experiences, if you would ask me about interdimensional time or travel, if you would ask me about intelligent beings from another dimension stepping into our dimension, I would have said you were crazy. I didn't believe it. And yet every Christmas, I sang, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." And I told a story in the pulpit about how the herald angels of God, read extraterrestrial entities, stepped out of another dimension, call it heaven, and sang, produced vibration that was heard and understood in this thing. It was there in our own religion, and I never would have believed it until I had my first out-of-body experience. And once that happened, I just realized, wow, all my life I've been close to this.
Let me ask you real quickly, were you a practicing minister when you had your first out-of-body experience?
No. Well, yes, I was.
Oh, so that must have shocked the hell out of you.
I didn't
Dear
understand.
Lord, what the hell's happening to me?
Well, I didn't understand what it was. As a matter of fact, it came at the end of an accidental vision quest.
Oh my God. Okay.
And I never expected it, but I'll tell you, that was the experience that kind of shoved me off my path that I was on and opened up new worlds to me.
Wow.
So.
Amazing. Hey, as we conclude, I want to bring up an interesting bit of information you found, and actually you highlight in your book. You discuss that the current earliest civilizations are Sumer and ancient Egypt, pre-dynastic Egypt.
Yeah.
But you also talk about in Israel, some archaeologists have found a settlement that dates to 20,000 years old. Now, before this discovery, our general consensus is that civilization, organized civilization, started about 6,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Where is this information? Why aren't we hearing more about it? Is it just
Yeah,
too much?
The archaeological digs going on around Jericho right now, which is probably considered to be one of the first cities ever made. It's just amazing. But then again, you go up to Gobekli Tepe. Now, it used to be said that agriculture was invented in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And now people are saying, no, 6,000 years before that, up in Turkey, the Fertile Crescent, that was where it began. And it spread out from there. But there were civilizations going on down in the Levant and in Israel right then that all of a sudden, about the same time that the agricultural revolution began to spread out of Turkey, these cities, which in many cases had already been built, started to build walls around themselves. Why do you build a wall around your city? You're being attacked from an outside force. Where did these people come from? Probably from the north. And so it just keeps going. If we don't ask the questions, then we get stuck in our own rut. And somebody once described to me a definition of a rut. It's a grave with both ends kicked out. And that's pretty much describes, I think, where we are sometimes if we are not open to these things.
Amazing. The book's called Hidden History, Ancient Aliens and the Suppressed Origins of Civilization. My guest today has been Jim Willis. Jim, why is it important that people get this book, and what would you like people to take away?
I hope they get it because it can be mind-blowing to find out some of the things that I've discovered when I was writing it. It can change your whole idea of who you are because it changes the idea of where we came from. If we don't know where we came from, we don't know who we are. It just opens up so many doors, and I'm hoping that people read it and say, wow, what are the possibilities? We need possibilities. That's what pulls us forward.
Great. Okay, the book's available. It's out now, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so they can get it on Amazon.
They can get it on Amazon or go to my website, jimwillis.net. And I hope that people do go to the website, jimwillis.net, because there's a contact page, and I love to hear from people. I really do.
Fantastic.
So love to hear from anybody listening. Or there's a Facebook page, jimwillis.author, or there's a YouTube page. If you look up Jim Willis on YouTube, something like What a Wonderful World, you'll find a bunch of videos that I've done there too.
Excellent. Hey, is this book on, did you do Audible version of this?
I don't think there's an Audible version of this. There is an Audible version that just came out recently of my book, The Quantum Akashic Field, an out-of-body experience book. And that does have an Audible version. I don't think Hidden History does.
Okay, I was going to say, unless it's fatiguing, I think you'd be fine to narrate your book.
Well, I'd love to. I would really love to.
I find it would probably be, I mean, it's not a small book. You got, what do you got here? Almost 400 pages, over 400 pages.
Yeah.
So that'd be, it'd probably be about an 6 hour narration for you.
Well, I'd love to do it. You're not the only one mentioning it. My wife would agree with you too. Well, telling me the same thing.
I tell you, the only way I got through Graham's book, America Before, was the Audible version. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
I mean, his book is a monster, It's 15 pages. So
yeah.
Anyhow, listen, much success to you. I enjoyed reading it, and I hope that you have great success with this.
Thank you, Cliff. Always good to be with you.